there was some fatigue about Putin as well, because he's in power for more than 20 years. And we see on many occasions that if a new face arise, like, for example, communist Grudinin during last presidential elections, or recently the governor of Russian Far East, Furgal, or even more recent figure, Prigozhin. When a new face arises, it arouses a lot of interest and sometimes support. And this is exactly because Putin stays so long in power.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio. I'm James Hansen, and today we're talking about how ordinary Russians feel about the war in Ukraine, about Vladimir Putin, and about the West. I'm delighted to be joined by Denis Volkov, director of the Levada Center, the non-governmental research organization based in Moscow. Denis, thank you so much for joining us today on Frontline.
Hello, good to be with you.
First of all, can you just tell us a bit more about the Levada Center and the work you do?
Well, we do public opinion polls, all kinds of sociological research, focus groups. So we are doing this for more than 30 years. It was first we work as VTSOM, state organization formed under Gorbachev. But then since 2003, we work as independent non-state institution, NGO.
Is it fair to say that the Levada Center really is one of, if not the only, accurate, impartial, independent source of public opinion in Russia?
Well, there are a lot of other centers, state centers, commercial centers. We are, I think, the only who have this broader view of what's going on, so as we see our goal to publish our research, and you can find longer trends about public opinion for dating back for 20 years, sometimes 30 years. Well, I think in this we are a unique organization in Russia, but there are many other centers just doing sociological research. We are trying to present this bigger picture about Russian society.
And how difficult is it for you to carry out that work, given the nature of Putin's regime? I know that the Russian government has called you foreign actors. You're not friends of the Russian government, or the Russian government aren't friendly towards you, perhaps is the way of putting it. How difficult is it to operate in that climate?
Well, it is rather difficult just to stay in business, stay in operation. Being a non-state actor, I think this is the biggest challenge, just to keep going, because many NGOs were closed down recently. Sometimes some of them were closed down by Russian state, like Memorial, for example, International Memorial, Nobel Prize laureate, and some others. What we try to observe all kinds of these laws, try to, when we publish, we put every kind of labels on our website, on our publications. Apart from that, doing the work itself, I would say it's still possible, and we plan to do our work as long as possible, as long as it is allowed to do so. Well, in this sense, it will not be our decision to stop working, and as it is still possible, we are doing it.
Well, full respect to you for carrying on the invaluable work that you do, given the political climate in Russia. We'll come on to some of your findings in a moment, but first of all, just from a practical level, how do you go about conducting your research, and how difficult is it to get honest opinions from Russians who may also be conscious of the climate of political fear in the country?
Well, the data on our website, it is usually obtained through face-to-face surveys. We try to keep our initial methodology that we started, of course, with some modifications, but still more or less the same methodology we started 30 years ago. Of course, we do other public opinion polls, telephone surveys, of course, but this is our main research program. Looking at the response rate, it is pretty stable. It is about um, 28, 30%. We saw a little decline last previous year, but now it's more or less back to normal. And judging from the surveys in other countries, it's more or less what Americans called golden standard of public opinion surveys. Of course, there is a question of this sincerity, but I would say that people nowhere are free of pressure, of peer pressure, of pressure from the dominant opinion. In Russia, I think it's, yes, we have this pressure from the state media, from state propaganda, but people live in this climate and they have to act in this climate. And I would say that public opinion polls, they reflect pretty accurately the overall climate of opinions that we have. And judging from it, I think we can do pretty good understanding of what's going on, what people think about how they are ready to or not ready, rather act upon it. So I think it's the method. It's still working.
And to what extent do you pay most attention to trends as opposed to the individual numbers in any one piece of research? What you're really looking at is how things shift over time.
Exactly. I think this is one. This is our strong point. Our strength that we can analyze longer trends, not only political trends such as Putin's ratings, which is actually also has a pretty long history now, more than 20 years, but also social, economic assessments. This all putting together and having all these trends together, they provide pretty accurate picture, comprehensive picture of Russian society. So yes, we try to exactly look at all these trends and put new events, new questions like about the war, about special military operation, as it is called in Russia. We put these questions in the longer context, or this context of longer trends, and I think this helps us really to understand what's going on.
Well, let's come on, Denis, to some of the latest data, starting off with how Russians feel about Vladimir Putin. How do they rate him as their president?
Well, we saw a consolidation of public opinion around president at the beginning of the conflict. It was not something unexpected. We saw the same situation 9 years ago in 2014, almost the same, very, very similar to what we had last time. And the situation and framework of conflict itself provides this conditions for these higher ratings. Of course, when we speak about this 80% of support, we must understand that there are different layers of this support. There is maybe core supporters who just love Putin. There are not many of them, but the strong or consolidated support, I would say, is about 45%. These are who say, yes, we support, no question about it. And about additional 30 or even 40% who say, yes, we have to support Putin because there is a conflict. There is, or when there is no wars, no conflicts, people tend to say there is no one else because the system is built in such a way that there's no alternative. So this is also a big pillar of Putin's support. So we can see a different dimension of the support. It's not absolutely solid, But yes, it is high. It's high, and apart from what I already told, the conflict, the this no alternative, which is uh, artificially built into the system. There's also the that many people remember that before Putin, they were living in bad conditions. The country was going through the transformative crisis of 1990s, and exactly after Yeltsin went and picked Putin as his successor, economy started to work, and during Putin's years, people started to live better than in '90s. So it's also helped to maintain his popularity and support.
That's really interesting. And is there any evidence from your research into why Russians like him? Is it a sort of respect thing? Is it a sense that he is a strong leader and they appreciate that?
No, as I said, I think many people say that, well, no one else around him. Uh, though I think we also, well, this the conflict provides the framework for this support, because nowadays people frequently say that the only Putin can help us to survive this pressure from the West. That we should be patriotic, we should be together with our president, even though there are, well, some difficulties, there are problems. Still, we should be together, united. But also, what we see, we saw it better after pension reform and prior to this international conflict, that there was some fatigue about Putin as well, because he's in power for more than 20 years. And we see on many occasions that if a new face arise, like, for example, communist Grudinin during last presidential elections, or recently the governor of Russian Far East, Furgal, or even more recent figure, Prigozhin. When a new face arises, it arouses a lot of interest and sometimes support. And this is exactly because Putin stays so long in power. And if we compare not only his approval ratings, which is pretty high now and was pretty high 9 years ago, if you look at the personal trust, actually it went up also considerably, but the overall figures are now lower than 9 years ago. And this is also, I think, a small indicator of this fatigue, which is also there in spite the consolidation that happened, strong consolidation that happened last year.
That's really interesting because sometimes in polling, the headline figure can mask what's happening beneath the surface, as it were. And sometimes people talk about someone's support being soft, so that part of it could, if factors changed, ebb away quite quickly. Do you think a large chunk of Putin's support is quite soft and could go from him if events changed?
Well, we see that this soft support amounts to about maybe a little bit less than half of his supporters, and always, I mean, the core supporters of Putin, they well, support him as a candidate from the state, from the authorities, because the state provides social benefits. The state provides money and stability, and Putin is associated with the state. Yes, he is a strong leader, and a big chunk of society likes it. But exactly because it is the state who provides social care. And we see that the core supporters of Putin are older generation and state employees who exactly depend from the state. And yes, and actually they like him. And I think they more or less think they are like-minded. That people who were born in the Soviet Union, people who are accustomed with this confrontation between Russia or Soviet Union and the West, for them well, it's ordinary situation, and they feel quite comfortable within it. I would say younger groups are not so supportive, and they are more skeptical, partly because they are more how is it? They use more internet, and on the internet, different sources, different video blogs, for example, with criticism of the authorities. And older people, they still stick, and as in European countries, they stick with television. And television in Russia, it is state dominated, and there is now a lot of different opinions on Russian TV. And this also helps to consolidate support around him.
What about, Denis, how Russians feel about the war in Ukraine more broadly? I mean, it was interesting a moment ago, you used two phrases that I suppose are kind of instructive. First of all, you said it's the special military operation, which of course is how the Russian government would frame their invasion. And also, you said it's part of a wider conflict with the West, which is how they sort of also try and frame it. Before we come on to the actual numbers, broadly speaking, do Russians agree with that framing, that they see it as a special military operation as part of a wider conflict with the West and NATO?
Well, especially in the very beginning, we saw the difference how people used these words. Those who supported, especially those with strong support, they used particular words, a special military operation. Those who were against it didn't support about 20% in our surveys. They particularly used the word war from the very beginning. Now this difference is not so sharp, probably because the authorities started to use the word war, though of course it's, I mean, more from as Vladimir Putin used it, it's the war the West is waging against Russia. And I would say this second framework is still there. Actually, it was there before everything started. We were doing focus groups. We were doing surveys prior, not knowing, of course, that there will be a war. And already people were blaming the West for the escalation already by December. And actually, not only it's not something special for this conflict. If you look at the Russian-Georgian War of 2008, other conflicts Russia was participating the last 20 years, all of them, I would say, were understood within the country as a conflict between Russia and the United States, not even the West, but primarily the United States of America. It's kind of our arch enemy, which masterminds everything, and others are seen as mere puppets of the United States. And also, it also helps, I think, to think more important of ourselves. But also, of course, there is now actual confrontation going on. But again, even before everything started, there was already this understanding, and people in focus groups were telling me, for example, in December, that the state is dragging us into the war, and we have to answer this challenge. Because, of course, what else should we do? Should we just go away? No, we just take this challenge. Many people were saying this, and but of course, the beginning of hostilities came as a big shock to almost everyone.
It's fascinating on your website, and it's worth saying you can see a lot of this research that you carry out on the Levada Center website, but you've got a tracker of Russian public opinion towards the United States over about 20 years or so. And it was more positive 20 years ago, around the turn of the millennium. Then it went downhill. There was a bit of a increase in favorability towards the US, it seemed, under the Trump presidency. But really, since the war in Ukraine, it's very sharply gone down, hasn't it?
Yes, of course. And I think it reflects the discussion on Russian TV and reflects the consensus in the Russian elites, especially, I think, security elites, but more broadly as well. And interestingly, I would also add to this picture these attitudes towards the United States. It contrasts very much with the attitudes toward China. Because when attitudes towards the United States, EU, other European countries are going down, attitudes towards China is going up. Because China is now our main friend after Belarus, I would say, and our main global friend. And this good attitudes toward China, it's exactly because we have bad attitudes towards the West. Because still attitudes towards the West are important. Those also those who don't like the West blame the West for everything within Russian lists. They still we see that the West is very important. It's a focal point, a reference point. Yes, we are in a confrontation, and but still, I think for many in Russia, in Russian elites, it's very important what actually West is saying, what is happening in the West. Though Russia is trying to portray itself as an alternative civilization, so it's not a Western anymore, but still, it's in minds. I think it's still very close to the West, and it's a reference point. Still, very important one.
How do Russians feel about Ukraine these days? Because part of the justification from Vladimir Putin for the invasion was this sense that Ukraine is part of Greater Russia anyway, and that it's the same people and that they're the brothers of ordinary Russians. Is that how ordinary Russians feel towards Ukraine, its government, and the Ukrainians, or is it more complicated?
But yes, it's a little bit, I would say, more complicated because the majority of Russians saw Ukraine, and I would say more so now, saw Ukraine as a separate state, for sure. And in 2014, this time as well, before everything began, the majority was saying no troops, no money, let them just do what they want inside their country. We should not interfere because it is a separate country. But there was also already by 2014 the topic of Russian-speaking population or Russians within Ukraine. And this is a very important topic because only it was, as soon as it was introduced, it changed the attitudes almost completely. When this topic is introduced, then majority say, of course we should interfere. Of course we should help Russian-speaking population. So this helps to change the attitude, and this change helps to all support and get this public support of Russia's interference into it. So, and still, Ukraine is seen as a separate country. This big chunk of Russian-speaking population, it makes this difference when we're speaking about this overall attitudes, not towards the country, but towards the conflict.
Denis, what level of support is there then for the war in Ukraine now among Russians, and has it changed since the war started?
Well, actually, it's pretty stable attitude. Though, of course, like we were speaking about Putin here as well, we have different dimension of this support, and we have several indicators, several questions to measure this support. One of them, overall support of Russian military, which is about 75%. The overall. This is, I think, the biggest number that we have. Again, the number itself could be broken into two parts. About 30% of weak support. People saying, "Well, yes, well, we should support our guys, or who else we should support, but of course, better that there should be have been no war." and because it's bad, and when people are dying, it's bad, and we would like it to stop. But we are small people. Putin knows better. What can we do about it? He decides. Then the stronger support, about 45%, these are people who supporting and not asking many questions, saying that, well, yes, again, there's Russian-speaking population, we have to defend them, Donbass, and so on and so forth. So this is one set of indicators. If we speak about this militaristic core, to Kiev and further, no step back, and so on and so forth. This is about 20 something, 22, 23%. Older generations, older men, who this kind of macho attitude. I think it's not only in Russia, everywhere is more or less the same. Those who, though these are men who will not go to fight the war. So these at least several dimensions. There's 20 something of militaristic core, rather strong support, which actually coincides with the number of people who are not supporting the peace talks, about again 40 something percent, and the overall figure is pretty high, but it's it's not solid, about 75%.
And where does it rank as an issue for ordinary Russians? How much do they care about the war? How big a priority is it compared to, for example, the state of the economy?
I think there is a very important condition of these high numbers of support of Putin, of Russian military and war itself. It's that the majority of Russians are not directly involved into it. And we saw that exactly in only one moment when it seemed so that the situation is changing during the partial mobilization last fall. We saw that very rapidly the numbers of those favoring peace talks began to grow. Anti-war sentiment started to grow immediately, but as it was only a partial mobilization and it ended very soon, this situation was over. And now, from the very beginning, now still, the majority feel that this is a distant war. We are not directly involved. It's going somewhere at Russian borders. Don't know exactly where. Somewhere near Belgorod, somewhere near Smolensk, and other towns, but not very. People are rather vague about it, where it is happening. So in these circumstances, the support stays high. And also another very important condition of this support is economic stability. Economic stability, which is provided by the state policy, curbing inflation and controlling inflation pretty effectively, and also a big amounts of money the state is spending on ordinary people. State employees, state pensions were indexed last year, and another important source of revenues of money going to people is this payments for special military operation participants, as they call it. And to give you an idea, the median income in Russia is about $500, roughly speaking, median income. In poorer regions, it's about $350. And the participant of special military operation gets each month about $2,000 each month. So this is a big chunk of money which is going actually to their families who are spending it on on now on flats, on cars, and so on and so forth. So this is why for almost a year and a half we have this very stable increase in estimates of economic situation. We didn't have this stable growth for many years, and this state spending they helped to maintain this picture.
That really is fascinating. I suppose you could almost accuse Putin of bribing the families of those serving in order to sustain that support. A couple of quick questions just to finish off, Denis. First of all, you've mentioned a couple of times the extent of the propaganda in Russia. Is there any way of measuring the impact that has on public opinion?
No, I think one of the ways to at least have this idea is the audience of state television. Television is still the main source of information for about, I think, 60% of population, especially older generations. We also see the growing importance of internet as well. But state television is solid, well, very solid. The same picture on several main news channels. And the internet, though it is almost as important now in the sense of that people using different sources of information over the internet, on the internet, websites, social networks, Telegram channels, putting together, it's more or less now the same amount of people using it as TV, but it's very fragmented. There's no one dominant agenda inside the internet, and actually, there's no only one social network. YouTube is still important, but YouTube, I think about only from 10 to 15% are watching YouTube channels regularly and getting news about what's going on from there. It's still pretty new source of information, though on an entertainment basis, many people watching YouTube. Telegram is also a very interesting new source of information, and now about 25% using Telegram channels as source of information. And this change came very quickly, almost by spring, end of spring last year. It tripled. The audience tripled. When Facebook was blocked, when Instagram was blocked on Russia, this audience grew because it was the source of alternative information, but not only alternative information, also the state channels are there. Prigozhin had his own empire on Telegram and so on and so forth. So internet is very diverse, very fragmented, and it's we see that people who are not using TV, they are less supportive of state message, but it doesn't mean that they are more oppositional. Not so. They are less supportive. Their support is less intensive because they are less indoctrinated there. So this, I think, maybe help us to understand the effect of state media in Russia.
And just finally, Denis, do we know to what extent the Kremlin pay attention to public opinion, maybe even to your research at the Levada Center? How much do they care what ordinary Russians think?
No, they care pretty much, and there are several state agencies who monitor the situation on a daily basis. So they have very fresh information on public opinion every day on major issues on every Russian region. So they care for it very much. It doesn't mean that they act upon it every time, but I would say it helps the Russian authorities to make decisions and also then to shape public opinion accordingly when the decisions are already made, how to make these decisions more acceptable for the majority, because I think this is the main instrument to understand how to keep things under control, how to keep things calm. I think this is how Russian authorities are using public opinion polls, and that they are using it. There's no question that they're doing this.
Well, Denis, it's been a fascinating conversation. Full respect to you for the work you do at the Levada Center, and thank you so much for joining us today on Frontline.